Good morning and welcome to today's Maryland Public Service Commission's administrative meeting. Looks like we have a full house. Thank you for joining us. Today we're missing Commissioner Richard. He's actually on DOE business. He's participating on the State Energy Advisory Board out in Colorado this week, helping relations between both the federal government and state government policies. Before we start our meeting today, I'd also like to recognize that we have a new employee amongst us. I believe Lucy Shea. Is Lucy here? Hi, Lucy. Lucy just joined us last week as a public utility auditor in our accounting division upstairs. Before she joined the PSC, she worked for a number of agencies, including the State Lottery Administration, the Office of the Comptroller, and the State Highway Administration. So we're going to put her good accounting skills to use. She has 2 degrees, Bachelor's of Science and Bachelor's of Art from the University of Maryland, College Park. So Lucy, thank you for joining us. We look forward to working with you. And without further ado, we will start the meeting. We have minutes from last week's November 20th meeting to review. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we adopt the meeting minutes from the administrative meeting of November 20th, 2018.
Thank you. Is there a second? The meeting minutes from November 20th are approved. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, you have 5 items on the consent agenda this morning. Item number 1 is OEEXXVI LLC filed an application for certification as a renewable energy facility for the Maryland Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard Program. It's the Greenville Wind Farm. And items 2, 3, 4, and 5 are filings from Potomac Electric Power Company, Delmarva Power and Light Company, the Potomac Edison Company, and the Baltimore Gas and Electric Company. They all filed updates to reflect new SOS rates.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if staff could entertain a quick question on these, on an item.
Which item, Commissioner O'Donnell?
Item number 1. Good morning, Ms. Page.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Paige Shaw on behalf of staff.
I was wondering if you knew how many of the renewable energy credits were that are awarded to our RPS applicants are out of state. What percentage of the state RPS portfolio is out of state?
That I don't.
Kevin Mosier on behalf of staff. It's about 75%.
About 75%. That's pretty consistent, between 75 and 80% over the life of the RPS program. We're not really developing as much renewable energy facilities in the state as maybe we had originally hoped to when we instituted the program. Is that fair?
I think that's accurate.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I understood the RPS system well. Thank you.
Do commissioners have other questions on consent items? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary. Yes, we need to take a vote on these. Commissioners, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. For item number 1, I'd move that we approve the application and issue a renewable energy facility certification number, direct the company to establish a REC account with PJM GATS within 30 days of certification, and file an on-site and behind-the-meter generation report with the Commission within 1 week of each recording of generation data with GATS, and direct the company to file notice with the Commission within 30 days of any changes to the information in the application. And for items number 2 and 3, I move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of December 1st, 2018 for Type 2 customers and June 1st, 2019 for residential and Type 1 non-residential customers. And finally, for items 4 and 5, I move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of December 1st, 2018.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The 5 motions for those items are all approved.
Mr. Chairman, first item on the administrative agenda, item number 6 is Deep Ellum Power and Gas Company, LLC, filed an application for a license to supply natural gas or natural gas supply services in Maryland.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Kenneth Albert on behalf of staff. This item addresses a request by Deep Ellum for authorization to operate as a natural gas broker and aggregator. Their management has significant experience in the energy industry. They do operate as a broker in Texas, but Texas does not regulate brokers. We've reviewed their website and their training and marketing materials and find them satisfactory. Therefore, based on its analysis, staff recommends that the Commission authorize Deep Ellum to operate as a natural gas broker and aggregator.
Thank you, Mr. Albert. Is there a representative from Deep Ellum with us today? No. Do commissioners have questions? Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move we grant the company a license to operate as a natural gas supplier in Maryland, limited to broker and aggregator services for the customer classes and service territories applied for and recommended by staff. Direct the company to provide marketing and training materials specific to its Maryland operations to the Commission staff 30 days prior to utilization of the materials in Maryland, and direct the company to file notice with the Commission within 30 days of any changes to the information filed in the application.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Next item, item 7, is the Potomac Edison Company and the Town of Thurmont Municipal Light Company filed a request for territory boundary revision.
And if representatives for either of the utilities are present, please step forward. Mr. Spivak.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. This is a filing by the Potomac Edison Company and the Town of Thurmont Municipal Light Company jointly petitioning to revise their respective service area boundary lines so that the Town Hall on East Main Street, currently served by Potomac Edison, would be served by the town, while the company's service center on East Moser Road, currently served by the Town of Thurmont, would be served by Potomac Edison. Under rules dating back to 1966, the Commission generally allows service territory boundary modifications if it can be shown that it would be more economical or more reasonable for a customer to be served by an electric company other than the one in whose service territory the customer is currently located, if the two electric companies involved are in agreement, and it appears to the Commission that it is in the public interest to grant the requested modification. Potomac Edison and the town have each determined that it would be more efficient and economical if they each served their own building. For Potomac Edison, the estimated cost of the work involved in making this switch is $15,000, while for the town, the estimated cost is $4,000. For the town, this amount is to be recovered through existing rates, while Potomac Edison will recover through its normal rate recovery processes. Based on the filing and discovery responses to staff's questions, staff is persuaded that the proposed territory swap has met the relevant standards and is therefore in the public interest. Staff recommends that the Commission approve the requested change to the service territory boundary lines of Potomac Edison and the Town of Thurmont, and requests that the finalized territorial maps be filed with the Commission's Engineering Division upon completion.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak. Do the parties have any additional information to provide?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is Jeffrey Trout. I'm counsel to the Potomac Edison Company. We agree with staff's recommendation. We stand on our petition, and we're ready to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Trout. I found the map particularly hard to read, but I will accept the
You're not the only one.
With Google Satellite and everything else, I was going to try to replicate it online, but I accept the representations that these facilities are relatively close to the boundary line. I don't have any other questions.
I was just curious. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Did you have one?
I'll
I'm
defer.
sorry.
I'll defer.
Oh, Mr. Trout, because the map was difficult to read, which facility, I see 3 little tiny yellow dots. Which one is which? Which one's moving?
Okay.
I assume those are the facilities, but there's 3 instead of 2, so then that got me even
That's
more
right.
confused.
There are several islands, and what we're doing is we're eliminating one island and creating a new one, so it really is just a kind of a swap. Looking at the map, as I recall it, the service center is towards the south and more towards the center of the map, and the town hall is further north and a little bit further to the east.
Okay.
And those are the ones that are being swapped.
Okay. Thank you.
Quick question for staff. So if you don't know, it's fine. But if you do, I'm kind of curious about when a territory boundary line change is requested and it's contested amongst the utilities. How has the Commission treated this in the past?
Usually at that point it becomes a contested proceeding, a case. it will be heard within the bounds of case number 8800. So it's docketed to be heard in that proceeding. So if you actually go and look on the electronic docket for that case number, you will find some past proceedings where it has been contested.
Very good. I'll use that case number reference, and I appreciate that to educate myself a little bit. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you. Seeing no additional questions, is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the commission approve the requested change in the service territory boundary lines of the Potomac Edison Company and the Town of Thurmont Municipal Light Company, and direct the Potomac Edison Company and the Town of Thurmont Municipal Light Company to file finalized territorial maps with the Commission's Engineering Division upon completion.
Thank you. And did we have counsel from Thurmont here? Anybody? Okay, good to see you. We don't see you very often here. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Thank you.
Next item, item number 8, is the Chop Tank Electric Cooperative, Inc. filed revised tariff pages. It's PSC Maryland number 3. The cooperative proposes a new rate tariff for commercial demand service.
Good morning, Commissioners. Chairman Michael Dean on behalf of staff. Item 8 is a tariff filing by the Chop Tank Electric Cooperative proposing a new rate schedule CD commercial demand service under Public Utilities Section 4-2028. An electric company tariff is to contain its schedule of rates and charges, terms and conditions, and policies for regulated service. Under Section 4-203, a new rate may be established by filing it with the Commission at least 3 days prior to it going into effect. The new commercial demand service rate would apply to new commercial customer accounts taking single-phase 60-cycle service at 50 kVA or less at available secondary voltages. Existing commercial customers would remain on Schedule C until disconnected or service is transferred to a new member. The new schedule has a flat customer charge and a per kilowatt charge. While described as a commercial demand service schedule, it is open to all members for uses in commercial, industrial, public buildings, clubs, churches, schools, and other cooperative members using 50 kVA or less. As discussed in staff comments, staff has reviewed the filing and evaluated the proposed rate as modified in the November 13 filing and recommends that the Commission accept for filing the proposed rate and revised tariff pages with an effective date of December 1, 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Do we have counsel for Chop Tank? I know we have a number of Chop Tank items today. 1, 2, 3, 4. Good morning.
Tiffany Troutman, Chop Tank Electric. I'm the manager of finance and regulatory affairs for Chop Tank. I'm available for any questions. Chris Miranda, who is our rates consultant, is also here today, and he can answer any questions for you.
Great. Ms. Troutman, do you have anything to add on this filing?
I do not.
Thank you. Do commissioners have questions? Commissioner Linton.
Thank you. Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you have any insight into how long customers will be able to stay on the current C rate? Is there any intention to encourage them to move to the new CD rate if it's approved?
We do not plan on encouraging members to move to that rate. That the current commercial rate, the members will be able to stay under that rate. We have not determined how many years that rate will be in effect. The new members will be able to go on to the new CD rate. That will be the new standard rate going forward, but we have not set a date to when the grandfathered commercial rate members would go to the commercial rate. But they do have the option if they want to move over.
Okay. So the staff reported that the company didn't have any plans to develop any marketing materials or anything to promote the new CD rate if it's approved. And you're closing the current C rate to new members in the future.
That's correct. And the reason why we've done that is because the current members, the current commercial rate members, will be able to stay under that rate. So marketing to them, it really doesn't apply to them. Now, if they do have a new account that they open for a new business, that may not even be under the commercial demand rate. It may go under a small power rate depending on the service for that facility. So we're just looking at it as it's a new standard rate and it's not an optional rate, and that's why we have chosen not to market this rate.
Okay, so will there be any internal, within the cooperative, is there any internal plan or approach to educate people who are on the C rate or who are relying on the C rate currently, and in the future find themselves being moved to the CD rate? And I'm thinking, for example, if a person owns a building and they sell the building to someone else, so it's the same building in the same place, but you have a new customer. The new customer will probably, if they've done their research and homework, will be familiar with the C rate, but without any kind of educational material may not know about the change or CD rate and what impact that would have on the business. So internally, is there any plan to communicate and educate those consumers?
Well, when a member calls us for service, the member service representative will let that member know that they will be placed on the commercial demand rate at that time, and that rate will be posted on our website, and they can have the opportunity to take a look at that rate or ask our member services center any questions. But internally, our employees will be educated to be able to speak about it if members have any questions.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Herman? No questions. Thank you. I don't know if this is a concern of yours, Commissioner Linton, but it does appear to be sort of a hidden rate that won't be widely known to parties currently on C that would move forward to CD. We'll keep an eye on this. If Chop Tank could be in contact with our staff as this is rolled out to inform us and provide a status report, informal status report to staff.
Chop Tank is not opposed to informing the members about this rate on social media or on our website, but because we see it as a default rate for new members, that's why we have chosen not to market the rate, but we're not opposed to it.
I think that would be a good idea to use those avenues to inform your members that there is an option for current existing C schedule customers to move to CD if it would potentially benefit them.
Okay, we will do that.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'd move that we accept the proposed rate and revised tariff pages for filing with an effective date of December 1st, 2018.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved. Thanks to staff, Mr. Dean, Mr. McCullough, for the buck sheet.
Next item, item number 9, is also filing for Chop Tank Electric Cooperative, Inc. It's a request for a temporary waiver of certain sections of COMAR 20.53.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. This is another filing by the Chop Tank Electric Cooperative requesting that the Commission waive the requirements of COMAR sections 20.53.04.02b, 20.53.04.02d, 20.53.04.03a, 20.53.04.03b, 20.53.04.04a3, as they would apply to the cooperative for a period of at least 18 months. The regulations in question address electricity supplier enrollments and drops and were modified in 2016 by the Commission to decrease the times in which such transactions must occur. Chop Tank argues that it would be costly to modify its billing and IT systems to meet these requirements and that none of its members have shown any interest in customer choice. COMAR 20.53.01.05 allows the Commission to waive a regulation in subtitle 20.53 for good cause shown. On December 22, 2016, Chop Tank filed a letter requesting a waiver of the revised requirements through July 1, 2017, predicated on plans to revise the entire electricity supplier coordination tariff and file that with the Commission with an effective date of July 1, 2017. However, Chop Tank did not file a revised supplier coordination tariff during the initial waiver period or at any point since then. The cooperative's initial waiver expired on July 1, 2017, and Chop Tank did not seek to extend the waiver until the current filing. So during the interim period of more than a year, Chop Tank was neither in compliance with the revised regulations nor subject to a valid waiver. According to Chop Tank's responses to staff's inquiries, the only attempt Chop Tank made to comply with the revised regulations was to review a scope of work for billing system and EDI upgrades issued by two small Pennsylvania cooperatives serving approximately 13,000 customers. Extrapolating from the $654,000 cost of the IT work estimate in that document, Chop Tank estimates that its IT system upgrades necessary to comply with the revised regulations would be $1 million. As discussed in staff's comments, staff is not satisfied that Chop Tank has made a real effort to comply with the Commission's directive, or even to compile the information that would be necessary to determine whether doing so would be excessively costly. Chop Tank generally argues that its members lack interest in choosing their suppliers because its rates are usually on the low side and the cooperative has high customer satisfaction rates. However, unlike the investor-owned utilities, Chop Tank has done very little to facilitate customer choice in its service territory, and without such action by the cooperative, it is impossible to determine whether or not Chop Tank is correct in those assertions. Staff believes it would be useful if the cooperative were required to seek a more rigorous estimate of the cost of making the IT changes required to implement the revised regulations. Accordingly, staff recommends that the Commission grant the requested waiver for a period of 1 year, direct Chop Tank to prepare and to submit to staff and the Commission a draft RFP for the necessary IT changes no later than 60 days from the date the Commission issues its order, require Chop Tank to issue the RFP after staff's review, and present the results to the Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak. Counsel for Chop Tank.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Brian Quinn. I'm a lawyer with the Venable Firm. I'm here today representing Chop Tank. It's Chop Tank Day.
Thank you, Mr. Quinn. I see that. Staff alleges that Chop Tank has failed to comply with Commission regulations. Is there a good cause as to why Chop Tank should not be found in contempt for that period of more than a year?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we readily admit that due to an inadvertent oversight, we've been out of compliance for about a year since we made this particular filing. The company was doing some work in that area, was reviewing its supplier coordination tariff. When it took a good hard look at this towards the end of the waiver period, before the waiver period was going to expire, it recognized that it was really necessary to do a complete overhaul of their system to even comply with an updated supplier tariff. And so what happened was they essentially, one of the things, and then we had a rate case, and it's one of the things that fell through the cracks. We readily admit that in our letter with
Mr.
staff.
Quinn, this is purely oversight? Is that what you're saying?
It was other priorities. Chop Tank's staff is here, and they can answer these questions probably better than I, but it was due to the fact that the company was looking at doing these upgrades, looking at upgrading their supplier coordination tariff. When it took a good hard look at the IT system, it determined that it would really have to do a complete overhaul of it. And they readily admit we're out of compliance with our waiver until I filed this current letter in July.
How do you respond to Staff Counsel's recommendation to the Commission?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I understand why you and staff would want to focus on the waiver, and I understand staff's recommendation. We agree that the waiver should be granted. We asked for a year and a half. They're granting us a year. We respectfully request a year and a half. If you're going to look at the past history here, I would recommend looking beyond this past year when we were out of compliance with our waiver and going back to the 17 years where electric supplier choice has been available in the service territory, and no suppliers have even come to Chop Tank's territory, and no members asked to change their electric supplier. So it's really, the facts speak for themselves sort of on the history here. And so we would respectfully request a year and a half waiver. We'd come back and report where things were. If we had any interest from a member or supplier, we would report that. That's what our letter suggested. The RFP is the second recommendation. We really think an RFP is unnecessary. This filing's been pending since July, and we have since, at staff's suggestion, went back to our IT provider, NISC, and got an estimate specific to Chop Tank. And it's a confidential estimate that we supplied to staff. It may be in your books, it may not be, but it confirmed that we were a little under. So we're not using the Pennsylvania estimate anymore as a proxy. There's no need for that. We've got our IT supplier saying it would cost a little less than than the $1 million that we anticipated. It would be a little less. As far as going through the time and expense to issue an RFP, when we already have an estimate from our current IT supplier, IT vendor, we just think that's really unnecessary. The current vendor already has provided the CIS system we use now, the accounting, payroll. We're really we're heavily invested in the current vendor, and if we would have to go out and get a completely new vendor, we would just have to replace everything, and it may be more costly.
Oh, the current vendor could still qualify and submit.
Current
a bid,
vendor
right?
could, yes, sir. And there's a footnote in staff's buck sheet that questions whether or not we are required to use our current vendor, our current IT vendor. We're not. We could go out and issue an RFP. But, Mr. Chairman, I just respectfully submit, it's been 17 years and no one's really been interested. I think electric supply competition really, it's not right. It's not an exact fit for every part of the state. I think Columbia Gas, we cite in our letter, they no longer have customer choice. In certain areas of the state it works, in certain areas of the state it doesn't. And we just think that, investing this type of member funds in a total upgrade,
I
there's been
recognize
no
the
interest.
history here and the fact
Yeah.
that customer choice and competitive suppliers haven't been active in your service territory for a long time, but I don't want that to be a self-fulfilling prophecy either, and that we just foreclose the ability for competitive suppliers to participate in Chop Tank's territory.
Mr. Chairman, can I just add one thing?
Yes.
It's really a case of, I'm not sure the lack of interest in competitive supply in Chop Tank's territory is really related to whether or not there's a updated EDI system or not, respectfully. I don't know if that has that much to do with it. I don't know if the members really care whether or not there's, electronic data interchange for a new supplier or not. I just think from where we're located, the lack of interest, I think if the economics work, there'd be suppliers there. I don't know if it has anything to do with whether or not we have an updated EDI system, respectfully. And that's...
Commissioners,
Well,
Commissioner O'Donnell, Mr. Spivak.
Mr. Chairman, I do note that Chop Tank's service territory is basically contiguous with Delmarva's. And Delmarva has been running a very successful customer choice program for the same period that Chop Tank has been running an unsuccessful one. Now, part of that may be, as Chop Tank asserts, is that their rates have been generally on the low side. But it's very hard to ascertain that for sure. As I did point out, what Delmarva has had to do to facilitate customer choice in its service territory is very different from what has been asked of Chop Tank. For example, Delmarva does have purchase of receivables, Chop Tank does not. They have made these EDI changes. They've also, been much more proactive in their relations with suppliers. So, part of it may be for the reasons that Chop Tank suggests, that it's not that it's not working in their service territory, but it may be simply, that Chop Tank has done nothing that would make the service territory reasonably attractive to suppliers. Another difference is Delmarva has to go out on the market to procure its power. Chop Tank is permitted to do a sole source contract with a cooperative, with a wholesale supply cooperative. And that's a very long-term contract with that cooperative. There are, fairly good reasons for that, but that may make a difference as well.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for staff and then some questions for the representative of the cooperative.
Was staff generally aware that the cooperative was out of compliance with COMAR from July of 2017 until a year later? Did we know this?
Speaking for myself, the answer would be no, but I can't speak for everybody on staff. I'm not sure if anybody was aware of it or not.
So we
And
became
it might have been a very, sort of back of the mind thing.
So we became certainly aware when the instant filing was made on July 18th of this year.
That's correct.
A year out of compliance with where we had affirmatively issued a previous waiver is very significant in my mind.
It's very significant to staff as well. Now with Chop Tank, as with SMECO, there's a very strong reluctance on the part of both staff and the commission to issue a civil penalty because that ends up just essentially going straight on the members' heads. So that's that, and another option of actually penalizing the cooperative's officers would be very, very extreme. I don't think I've ever seen it happen.
I understand. I appreciate that, and I live in a cooperative service territory, but I have to tell you, we have the rule of law in this state, and we don't absolve people from adhering to the rule of law because we feel bad about the consequences of that. Right? Would you agree?
I would completely agree, Commissioner. And as I said, in this instance, that's why we tried to craft a remedy that essentially fit the problem at hand and was something that would not be painless for the cooperative.
I think this commission deserved to know that we had a utility out of compliance with one of our orders and out of compliance with COMAR much sooner than a year hence. So let me turn to the company. Mr. Quinn, you seem to suggest that the company under the previous waiver did an analysis, got towards the end of that waiver period, found out it was going to be expensive to implement, and then the dog ate your homework. How does that happen? You find out it's expensive and then you just drop it?
Yeah. Commissioner O'Donnell, I please don't misunderstand my comments. I didn't mean to minimize our appreciation for being out of compliance. We understand the seriousness of that. That's the answer that I have. It's the answer. I don't know any other way to say it. It's one of the things that just fell through the cracks. The companies here, there's representatives here who could answer any other specific questions, but that's the answer. It's not a good one, but it's the answer we have. I don't know if, but that's all I have for you, Commissioner O'Donnell. I understand.
So you seem to suggest that because your members haven't affirmatively expressed an opinion that they want choice, that therefore somehow that justifies the cooperative not adhering to COMAR or not adhering to the rule of law in this state. I don't get it.
No, I didn't mean to suggest that, Mr. Commissioner. What I meant to suggest is the consumer's lack of interest and the supplier's lack of interest justifies the waiver. So that's all I meant by that comment. But
well, so the previous waiver was predicated on the company needing a little bit more time to implement the regulation, and then it failed to meet its obligations, its affirmative commitment to this commission, and then you're back asking for another waiver. And why should I have any more faith that you're going to vigorously, without partiality and prejudice, execute your promises this time when you didn't the last time?
Yes, sir. Commissioner O'Donnell, all I can tell you is if there's a penalty that the commission would like to impose, I mean, that's the best I have. As soon, this is an issue that's obviously come to a head now. The company is absolutely focused on it going forward, and there's representatives of the company here that have heard every comment you've made, and I can assure you this is something that will not happen again.
I would certainly hope not. You know my background,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Quinn, as a 22-year legislator in the State General Assembly, and the state legislature and the government of Maryland has said this is going to be the policy of the state on behalf of the citizens,
Yep.
and this commission has reinforced that through implementation of regulations. And we certainly won't, I will speak for myself, I certainly won't take lightly the ability of a utility in this state to flaunt that policy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Herman.
So, Mr. Spivak, in your view, the company's done little to facilitate choice, and you mentioned POR and their interactions with suppliers. Is there anything else in your mind that the company could do to facilitate choice?
The only other thing I could really think of specifically would be putting their power supply out to bid, as the investor-owned utilities do, and I don't think contractually they're allowed to do that, at least
Right.
while they remain contractually bound to ODEC.
Right, so clearly that's not really an option unless we completely
But
have
certainly,
a complete different, we'd sort of somehow change their cooperative status or something like that. I mean, you know, that would be a very big remedy, would it not?
it certainly would, and you know, again, I don't think that would be feasible.
Right.
On the other hand, perhaps requiring the cooperative to do purchase of receivables, as the investor-owned utilities do, might help considerably here. Certainly, it seemed to inspire more supplier activity when that was done for the investor-owned utility service territories.
Okay, and has anybody proposed that? Is that before
I
the commission?
don't believe any proposals has been put before the commission on that.
Right, okay. So, Mr. Quinn, are customers able to shop now in the service territory?
Yeah, as our letter indicates, we would, yes, any customer that wants to contact the cooperative's office and say they're interested in a competitive supplier, we would manually handle that changeover.
Okay, and how long would that take? You know, if you had to do it manually, if somebody wanted to make a change, the rule says, I think, we're 2 days?
3 days.
3 days? How long would it take for the cooperative to accommodate a switch?
I don't have the answer to that, Commissioner Herman.
Ms. Troutman, anybody have an answer to that?
Is that 30 days?
Sounds like we don't have an answer.
Don't have an answer. The discussion, Commissioner Herman, is it wouldn't take 30 days, somewhere between 3 and 30, so is sort of what we're talking about, but we would make it happen.
Well, the old rule was, what, 12?
12.
Would the cooperative previously would have had to accommodate 12, right?
Yep,
So they,
yep.
in theory, it shouldn't be any more than 12 because the cooperative never said they couldn't meet that.
I agree.
Right, okay. So, for argument's sake, we'll say it's 12 days. And all the other supplier, utility consolidated billing, can the cooperative do that, or would the supplier have to do dual billing?
I think is that one of the things that might be one of the sections, I think we would have to do dual billing.
Okay. Is the cooperative taking any steps, maybe not POR, but some of these other steps to be able to interact with suppliers and potentially try to make supply available, more available or more attractive to its customers?
Yes. Well, we had a question back and forth with staff about this during the pendency of the filing. The short answer to your question is no. The cooperative just doesn't feel like it's its responsibility to market its service territory. Really, at some point, it comes down to the supplier's responsibility to be shopping for or to be advertising for customers. So the short answer is the cooperative doesn't actively facilitate or market customer choice in its service territory on behalf of suppliers.
Do you have a customer choice section on the website?
I don't think so.
No.
No. But if you'd like us to put one up, take it back to the company, and I'm
Well, I
sure
think
they
that, you know, what you're hearing here is
Yes.
some concern on behalf of the commission that the cooperative, you know, that I looked at the statute, the cooperative is supposed to be open for business under choice, right?
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
not one of those where it could be if it wanted to be.
Shall
but
be, correct.
It shall be, right? It's open for choice. So to the extent the cooperative can take some relatively some steps that are not expensive, you know, for example,
ma'am.
putting something on your website and reaching out to suppliers, because I saw there were 3 suppliers that were potentially looking for customers in your service territory somewhere in the
I saw that in staff's comments. I'm not aware of those suppliers.
right, and, you know, reach out to the, you know, try to facilitate it, even if this, you know, right now the cooperative can't process it in 2 days. I think at this point it's so nascent in your service territory that 12 days would probably be, you know, at least getting started.
Yeah.
It would not necessarily, from my standpoint, be as much of an issue. But I think that what you're seeing here is some concern that the cooperative is not open for business and is supposed to be by law. So if maybe the cooperative can respond to that.
Yeah, Tiffany Troutman from the company's here.
Thank you, Ms. Troutman.
We do on our website under our residential rate tariff have a price to compare on our website. We have not said we're closed for business when it comes to customer choice. We haven't turned anybody away. We haven't turned any suppliers away. We just simply have not had any suppliers register in our territory, and so I just want to make that clarification that we
I
have.
understand that, and I'm not suggesting that you're saying that. What I'm suggesting is that there are some affirmative steps that the staff has mentioned that would not be high cost and would not be potentially difficult for the cooperative to put in place that might signal that it is, in fact, open for business. I'm not suggesting that you're saying that you're closed for business. I'm just suggesting that there may be some steps the cooperative could take to facilitate choice, as staff has mentioned, and maybe you can even work with the staff to look for ways that would not be high cost, because I understand you don't want to spend a lot of members' money without, you know, having a positive result from that. So that's kind of a suggestion from me that there are ways I think that the cooperative could take some affirmative steps to facilitate choice pursuant to the statute.
Okay, thank you. We will talk to staff about that
Mhm.
and move forward with that.
I think that you know would be helpful for me at least.
Thank you.
Do you have any?
Commissioner Herman, could Mike Wheatley say something as well?
Hi, good morning. Mike Wheatley, I'm the president and CEO of Chop Tank, and I know many of you. I haven't met you, Mr. Chairman, but I'm glad I picked today to come. It seems like it's Chop Tank Day, as somebody mentioned, and it seems like this is an important issue, and all the comments I've heard are duly noted. Customer choice goes back a long way in my history. I was at the Commission on Working Groups and so forth 20 years ago when choice first came in, and I've seen various iterations of this and the impacts that it's had, you know, throughout the state. And basically, I did want to put one thing in a context, you know, this cost, you know, $1 million here and $1 million there. We are projected this year to have an operating margin of $4.3 million. So the $1 million means a lot. You know, we're not a big electric company. So all things being equal, you know, that's $1 million of expense, and if you exercise that, you'd be at $3.3 million instead of $4.2 million or whatever. So that, you know, we can make a commitment to do better. It's just that over time I've seen suppliers, we have a supplier authorization process, and we've had contacts from suppliers over time. And it's just that they'll call and they're interested. A month later, they're not interested and they go away. And so we really never had a driving, compelling supplier force that's, I bet in the last 20 years we probably had 3 or 4 that have contacted us, and then they've just gone away. So, because of the cost, because of some negative things that have happened to the sister co-op, SMECO, and some of their experiences, we just haven't had it high on our agenda. I do respect the fact that it's in the part of the law, and it's something that we need to do. And so, it seems to me like it's the appropriate time to, put this on the front burner. Also apologize in the respect that we do take the commission seriously and the commission orders seriously. So apologize that the waiver, this deal about the expiration of the 12-month thing, did kind of slip through the cracks on our end, and I think that's totally on us. I will say that we have hired a general counsel that's a full-time member of our staff now. It's Mrs. Sarah Dahl, and she's here this morning. And part of her responsibility going forward will be to ensure that items like this don't fall through the cracks. And that's all really I have to say, that, we'll make a commitment that we'll put this on the front burner and we'll make something happen over the next 12 months or so.
Thank you.
And I wasn't real too keen on this part about the commission. I don't know what you call it, a sanction or a slap on the hand or whatever.
It's more than that, a civil monetary penalty.
Yeah, I'm not too keen on that idea, but I will make that commitment that we'll do a better job in the future. And
thank you. I think we've heard your point loud and clear. Thank you. Commissioner Linton, no. Obviously, there was an unfortunate lapse in failure to comply with the Commission's regulations. I don't see that there's good cause based on our granting of the last 12-month waiver to grant, as the company requests, a 18-month waiver. Staff recommends a 12-month waiver, and I do concur with staff's recommendation based on the track record we have here. Glad to hear that the cooperative has hired a full-time general counsel to keep an eye on these issues going forward, so we'll know who to contact if things continue to fall between the cracks. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I note that staff's recommendation is to require an RFP, and given that we've heard that the cooperative has a actual estimate from their IT provider that would be consistent, if not more than the $1 million that they estimated. I believe that's what I heard. I'm not, in my mind, I'm not certain that an RFP is necessary at this point, because we have an actual estimate. And going out for bid, I understand with utility systems that trying to get, if you have a provider who's familiar with your system, that's usually a good way to go. So I'm not sure that I agree with staff's recommendation that we have the RFP.
Commissioner Herman, can I ask staff, was staff aware that that the cooperative already had an estimate in hand when it produced its buck sheet?
It's referenced in staff's buck sheet, not necessarily that they had an estimate in hand for their system, but that they had, during the course of our discussions, gone to a sister cooperative in Delaware that had to do a similar project and gotten their cost, and they didn't. I don't recall being given a specific figure, again, other than $1 million. That roughly that was the cost that they gave, that the Delaware cooperative gave them.
Right. The Delaware cooperative indicated that it had spent approximately $1 million.
Correct, and I think that's the estimate that the council is referring to.
No. Sorry. Just to be clear, Mr. Chairman, no, November 19th, in response to, Lloyd gets a lot of emails, and we had a lot of data requests back and forth on this, but we had the NISC, who's our current IT provider, do a quick and dirty estimate for the cooperative for Chop Tank specifically for the IT upgrades, and we sent it to staff on November 19th. And that's the one that came in a little below the $1 million.
Okay, so November 19th, you transmitted that to staff.
And I can certainly recheck my email and probably pull that up.
Okay, so Commissioner Herman, are you proposing that we waive the request for the RFP?
I'm proposing that we not direct the RFP, but I would agree with the waiver for a year.
Commissioner Linton or O'Donnell?
I'll just further comment. Was that wasn't a motion? Or was that?
It was not a motion.
Okay. Just further comment. I'm inclined to do somewhat less, to be a little less accommodating, only because of the track record and history in this case. Maybe 6 months or less, but I appreciate President Wheatley's comments. I think the message has been sent, and I will support a year, but hopefully we won't have to revisit this item for another waiver in the future, because I think there will be zero tolerance on my part at that point. So that's my comment.
So I wanted to ask, what does the commission have in mind for after the expiration of that 12 months? Chop Tank's request is essentially that it be given 18 months to assess the condition of the market in its service territory, and if it does not see any customer choice activity developing in the territory during that period, then to obtain a permanent waiver at the end of that. Is the commission's expectation going to be that that's what occurs, or that Chop Tank will be in compliance with the regulation, or some third option? It would probably be helpful if the commission would specify what its intent is in that regard.
Well, I suspect one year from, or right prior to the conclusion of the 1 year waiver, Chop Tank would do one of two things: provide a status report to show us the progress that they've been making, or request a permanent waiver.
I can speak for myself. I will tell you my expectation that the cooperative is out of compliance, has been out of compliance with COMAR for over a year, and I expect full compliance with COMAR, and I think my comments have made that very clear. I expect the cooperative to comply, not look at, not dance around the edges and maybe come back in later. I expect compliance, and it's going to be expensive. And I expect, as one commissioner, not speaking for this commission, compliance with the law. Period.
No, I think we all agree with that. Yeah, compliance with both the statute and COMAR is mandatory.
Mr. Chairman, I did have one question for staff, and this goes to the question that was raised in the potential revision to the motion. Staff had recommended that the cooperative submit a copy, or I guess, of the draft RFP. What was staff's intention with that RFP? What did you plan to do with it once you received it?
I think the intent I had in mind with that was to be able to review the RFP and ensure that the scope of the project that it was proposing was appropriate for what actually needs to be done, that it was not more or less than what needs to be done.
Okay. So as part of the emails that somewhere stashed in your emails, there's potentially a copy of some information related to the information that the cooperative has already obtained from their internal or in-house tech company. So would it be useful to staff to have that information, perhaps have an opportunity to look at that to see what it entails and if that's reflective and responsive enough in staff's mind?
It may be. The cooperative did supply at one point in this process the RFP that had been used, the contract that had been used by the utilities in Pennsylvania, I believe. So I had that, and possibly, I don't think I have the one from Delaware, but it's possible.
Mr. Chairman, at the risk of opening my big mouth, just to be clear, we didn't ask for a permanent waiver. I don't even know if that's even a thing. The statute says the cooperative has to have its service territory open, so we suggested in our letter that we would likely request a waiver for another term, and whatever that term might be. So your understanding is correct. We would envision coming back in a year with a report on how the activity is going in the service territory. I understand, Commissioner O'Donnell, that's not what you're looking for, but that's what we asked for in our letter. Just to be clear, we didn't ask for a permanent waiver at the end of this term. We just said we'd come back and revisit the issue. And here's a copy of the NISC estimate we sent to staff on November 19th. So I'll send it again if I have to. Lloyd can look at it and we can work. Maybe, hopefully, that will satisfy their request for or eliminate the need for the RFP.
You're willing to share all that information with staff?
Already sent it to them, but yeah, we'll send it.
Mr. Quinn, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Are you communicating
Open my mouth.
to us that you probably will be back here within a year with a report and giving us a progress report and requesting a further waiver?
Commissioner O'Donnell, that was just I was just wanted to clarify staff's comment that we were suggesting some sort of permanent waiver. We didn't ask for a permanent waiver in our letter, and I just wanted to clarify that our only request was we'd come back at the end of the term and possibly request a waiver for another term if there was no interest in suppliers in our service
Do
territory.
you anticipate coming back before the end of this waiver term with a report that you're in compliance with the law?
I hear you loud and clear, and the company hears you loud and clear, so...
Because the reality is we could find the cooperative in contempt right now.
Commissioner, I can only tell you what was in our letter, and I just wanted to clarify, we never asked for a permanent waiver in our letter.
Okay.
So that was not our intent.
I just want to make very clear what I'm hearing and what I hear you communicating and what I'm communicating.
I hear you.
Mr. Whately, briefly, if you can.
Yeah, I hear you as well. Our intent within the next 12 months is to provide you a report that will show you that we're in full compliance.
Commissioner Herman has a proposal on the table to dispatch with the requirement that the company provide an RFP within 60 days. The company appears amenable to providing any information regarding its current vendor to staff without any limitations, I understand. Is that your proposal, Commissioner Herman?
Yes, my proposal would be to grant the waiver without requiring an RFP or the accompanying requirements of the RFP in the staff's motion.
Do commissioners support Commissioner Herman's proposal?
I support.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move we grant the requested waiver for a period of 1 year.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. The motion is approved. Don't go anywhere, Mr. Spivak.
Mr. Chairman, next item, also filing from Chop Tank Electric Cooperative. It's PSC Maryland number 3. It's the company's proposed time of use rates.
Mr. Baker.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Benjamin Baker on behalf of staff. Chop Tank has filed 5 optional time of use rates for all customer classes. Only the standard offer service portion of these tariffs incorporates time of use rates. The proposed distribution rates for these classes are not time of use. To use the proposed time of use standard offer service charges, the customer would have to agree to a different distribution rate, most notably a higher customer charge than approved in Chop Tank's previous rate case in April of 2018 for all but one class. Staff recommends the Commission reject the 3 proposed rates for residential and commercial customers due to the proposed higher customer charges that go against Commission precedent and are disadvantageous to low usage customers. Staff notes that one customer's proposed residential rate includes a distribution demand charge based on peak usage, which no utility in Maryland has. Staff recommends the Commission accept the 2 proposed rates for industrial customers, subject to the modifications proposed by staff. Chop Tank's optional rate for small and medium customers is a single combined rate that is similar to a previous proposal that was rejected by the Commission in the previous rate case. because the company failed to justify the rate. However, the Commission can accept the rate schedule for small and medium industrial customers since the rate does not unfairly burden a specific customer class and is an optional rate. Staff supports Choptank's time of use SOS proposals, but staff is concerned the proposed rates might not recover the expected revenues and is also concerned that the system cost savings will not be realized. But we believe there are two mitigations in contention. One, Choptank should reset its time of use rates within 1 year to better ensure full cost recovery. And two, Choptank has filed a separate tariff that ensures no energy cost shifting occurs between customers on time of use rates and customers without time of use rates if cost savings have not been realized. Therefore, staff believes the Commission can accept the all industrial rates with the proposed true-up in place, a requirement that time of use SOS charges be reset within a year, and using staff's modified large industrial rates. Should the Commission accept the optional rates, Choptank should be directed to share their marketing material with staff and OPC. Choptank should also file an evaluation within 2 years of the rates being implemented to determine if any cost shifting is occurring and if actual system savings are being realized. Staff notes that Choptank's estimate for marketing is $11,000. Therefore, staff recommends the Commission 1. Reject the tariffs filed for RT, RT2, and CT. 2. Accept proposed rate schedules GT and PT, subject to the modifications proposed by staff, with an effective date of January 1st, 2019. 3. Require Choptank to update the standard offer service portions of the tariff within 1 year of acceptance. 4. Require Choptank to share all marketing material with Commission staff and OPC 30 days prior to distribution of the materials to customers. And 5. Require Choptank to provide an evaluation after 2 years of the time of use rates being implemented to determine if there is cost shifting and if there are actual cost savings being realized.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. Do People's Counsel wish to speak today? Mr. Fields.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. And Commissioners, William Fields for the Office of People's Counsel. We also recommend rejection of the two residential proposed tariffs. We think the basic, and again, similarly to staff, the basic problem here is that they've married this time of use supply rate proposal with a proposal to change the distribution rate to a very high customer charge and a lower kilowatt hour charge. Those two proposals just, they go at cross purposes. The time of use supply rate gives customers additional control over their bill, but then the high customer charge on the distribution side reduces the ability to control the bill. And it doesn't provide, and it's really not necessary. They haven't provided any indication that there's additional cost on a customer basis or otherwise in order to serve these time of use customers. So there's really no basis other than the same arguments that have been made in the rate case earlier this year for raising the customer charge. It's just really not related to the concept of having a supply time of use rate on the supply time of use supply rates, which is not something that we're opposed to. The other utilities have time of use supply rates, and we certainly would be willing to continue discussions about that to find ways to update the rate, as Mr. Baker talked about. That would be an important thing to make sure that the rates stayed accurate to their wholesale supply costs, and also some reasonable reporting requirements for the cooperative would also be appropriate. We got the letter from the Cooperative Association yesterday, and just a few comments on that. They relied heavily on the idea that this was a voluntary rate and that there couldn't be any harm to allowing customers to sign up with this. If we were talking about cost-based supply time of use rates, that might be true. With the distribution changes they have, as staff did a nice job of pointing out in one of their appendixes to their buck sheet, with a high customer charge, that's detrimental to low-use customers and beneficial to high-use customers. So what you could have here is high-use customers choosing this optional tariff just based on the fact that they're going to save money on the distribution side, with nothing to do with switching their or amending their usage on a time-of-day basis. And they might pay less just because of that, which would in turn end up shifting costs to the low-use customers who really wouldn't be able to take advantage of this because of the high customer charge makes it unattractive to them on an economic basis. So we do see some potential harm to that. The second point they make was about net energy metering. This tariff, as I understand it, wouldn't be open to net energy metering customers. The association talked a little bit about gathering some data, but we're not really talking about a rigorous pilot situation here. This is just would be a voluntary tariff option, and I'm not sure if they were talking about collecting the data to use with respect to some Virginia co-ops or what they would be doing with the data. But and I'd also point out that it's my understanding that the PC44 rate design working group, now that we have the Daymark value of solar study, is going to talk about the questions or issues around distribution rates and net energy metering customers. We're going to start talking about that working group. So it would seem to us to be a better approach to have that discussion with now that we have that Daymark report and see where that goes, instead of just approving this tariff and seeing whatever we could learn from that, although we haven't sort of set that up on a rigorous basis. So our recommendation is, with respect to the residential customers, to reject this tariff. And again, we are certainly open. Oh, one other point on the association letter. They said that a supply time of use rate would not be practical. I'm not sure what that really means, because there is a supply time of use rate in the tariff proposed here. Again, the problem is that they've also amended the distribution charge. There's no reason that we can see that you couldn't do the supply time of use rate without amending the distribution rate. So I wasn't really sure what that part of their letter was getting at. In conclusion, with respect to the residential rates, we as staff suggest rejecting those, and we certainly could continue the discussion on a time of use rates on the supply side.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. Is the association represented here today? Good afternoon. If you'd like to make an appearance, and do you have any response to People's Council? We received your letter. I note that it was late filed. It did not meet the deadline of Monday, November 26th, but we do have it before us.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Thank you for letting me speak today. I want to reiterate my gratitude for being allowed to comment and to submit the letter. Very grateful for that. The Association of Electric Cooperatives is the statewide service organization for electric cooperatives in Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia. We support Choptank's time of use rate proposals as originally designed. We have been working on issues implicated by these proposals regionally for many years, and we ask the Commission for its consideration and to approve the rates. Rates that send precise price signals, including in the distribution portion of the rate, will be needed and will be important as we consider what the grid looks like in the future. Choptank Electric, as other cooperatives are, Choptank would be a perfect test bed for this sort of time of use rate design. And as I noted in my letter, it is completely voluntary. Your sister commission in Virginia has approved voluntary programs like this and does so routinely in many contexts. Delaware Electric Cooperative also has similar voluntary structures in place, though not a time of use rate specifically. I would also note that the rates are revenue neutral, using the same cost of service data as recently adjudicated in the cooperative's rate case. This money is just being collected in a different way. The high fixed cost, the high customer charge in and of itself should not be a reason to reject these rate proposals. This is an opportunity for the Commission and for Choptank to go beyond traditional rate-making design principles and really explore something that may be useful to the future of rate design. Fixed charges reflect fixed costs, and as customer habits change, a distribution rate that is weighted towards the energy volumetric component becomes less relevant in a time of use rate scenario. As the People's Council commented, a lot of things could happen, and the rate could also work as it's designed. Without the changes in the distribution portion of the rate, that does become more difficult. I noted on the website, the Commission has at the top of its website a national leader in regulatory excellence. And this is an opportunity to live out that motto. Price signals, as embedded in these rates, would lead to better energy efficiency, demand response. Over the very long term, 30 years, the full value of net metering, solar plus storage, all of these things can be unlocked and unleashed in much larger quantities than can be done today. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brumberg. We'll take the cooperative last if the cooperative wishes to speak on its proposal. Or not.
Just here to answer any questions. Chris Miranda, our rate consultant, is also here to answer any questions.
Thank you. I recognize that the cooperative filed a number of pleadings in June and August regarding its proposal, although I found the justification to be relatively thin, in my opinion. I found Mr. Brumberg's letter to be helpful in shedding some light, although I only received that this morning because it was late filed. Mr. Miranda provided some helpful information in his data responses to staff that I read in the buck sheet. But I am still concerned with what I've heard from our own staff counsel and from Mr. Fields, People's Counsel, that there may not be opportunity to properly recover some of the expected revenues. And I'm also concerned with the fact that there may be some shifting of potential costs to customers and members that do not elect to use one of these time of use rates. That brings me back to the fact that I didn't find sufficient evidence in the June and August updates that the cooperative filed. I may have some more questions, but I'll defer to my commissioners at this point. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you. Let me first clarify with staff, if I might. Your proposed modifications,
on page 5 of my buck sheet, it was simply a change to it was a change back to a proposal that was made, I believe, early August or late August by Chop Tank. When we were going through the proposed rates by Chop Tank, we found that a portion of the rates were designed using AMI data from this year, while using test year data from their previous base rate case, which I believe was 2012, 2013. And in that, for the large industrial class, there were 16 customers then, but there's only 11 customers now, which significantly altered the shape of the billing determinants that were going into the development of the time of use rates. And so, while we were trying to go back and forth, trying to find a way to basically ensure that the rates would actually recover the revenue we expect them to recover, they put this forward. But going through the information provided, I didn't see how it really mitigated that concern. But during the process, we also came to an agreement that they would file an update to their PCA, which is effectively a way of separating the time of use customers from the non-time of use customers when they're trying to ensure that there is sufficient revenue recovery for their supply rates. And second, we also believe that if they update these SOS rates within a year, that revenue recovery from this large industrial class will be mitigated. So I've proposed to basically leave the rates at where they were proposed in early August instead of early November, so that the rates were developed with the same methodology as the other class that we were recommending be accepted.
And I guess inherent in your recommendations is to leave the customer charge where it currently is.
Correct. Well, so for the large industrial class, there was no change to the distribution proposal. So we didn't have any issues with this large class.
All right, so the rejection of the proposal then will maintain status quo ante on the customer charge.
Right, except for the general class
where they exist,
combining two classes into.
Okay, fair enough. Let me ask the company. The association alluded to this being a great way to test this concept. I don't want to. I'm paraphrasing, but alluded to a kind of proof of concept. Did the company consider piloting this proposal?
We did not. We just wanted to be able to have time of use rates for our members, and they are optional. We're not forcing our members to stay on these rates if they don't like the rates. We're not requiring a 12-month, we're not requiring them to stay on for 12 months, but if they go off the rates, we do require them to stay off for 12 months. And so we did not consider doing this as a pilot, just as an additional offering.
So the commission for a fairly significant amount of time has resisted large changes in the consumer charge, the fixed cost charge through on utilities, and it's well known, and the position of the utilities generally is obviously a different place than the commission has been for a long time. Why shouldn't I consider this an assault on that position just through a different means of keeping the customer charge within some bounds for the residential consumers?
The cooperative felt like this was not an assault on previous rulings because these are an optional rate, and if the member wants to stay on the standard rate, they can, and if they want to go on to these time of use rates that do have a higher consumer charge, that's their choice. The member has the choice on which rate they would prefer.
I get it, but once the commission kind of makes the exception to go to a high, maybe even excessively high fixed charge, then we've kind of set precedent from my perspective. And yes, it is the choice of the consumer. However, I don't understand the nexus between that. If you want time of use rates, you have to eat this high fixed charge. As OPC maintains, they're kind of antithetical. Do you have a comment on that?
Well, I do understand that OPC has concerns with low usage members not being able to take advantage of these rates. And my comment to that is that our low usage members, as it's been documented in previous cases, are hunting lodges, boat docks, vacation properties, and those are members that would not normally take advantage of this rate in the first place. So we feel like we are giving these members a choice. They are revenue neutral, and I understand your concern with the higher consumer charge, and that may open the door for other utilities or other rates to have a higher consumer charge. But all those rates are approved by the commission, and the commission does have the opportunity to deny those rates. I will also say that our higher consumer charge would probably be higher than any of the other utilities in the state anyway because of our members per mile versus the number of customers per mile that the other utilities have.
Thank you.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up on Commissioner O'Donnell's question regarding the rolling out of this proposal. So it's not, just to be clear, this is not considered a pilot program. This is a new offering.
Yes.
And so there's no limit then on the number of customers who could decide to enroll in one of these time of use rates if they chose to do so?
That is correct.
Okay, so I guess the next question for me then is why now? What's is there a time that this is the right time to do this? Is there some reason for it? I mean, and I'm thinking in the back of my mind of the Commission's current PC 44 process, where we have other time of use rates that are, and I'm not going to put myself out there by saying where we are in all of them with each company, but certainly Choptank could have participated in that process as well. So what's wrong with those time of use rates versus the ones that you've proposed? Why wouldn't the ones in PC 44 work for you as well?
Well, before PC 44 started, Choptank had already started working on time of use rates and discussing different scenarios, different rates, different offerings, creative offerings for our members. We are fully AMI deployed, and we have been for 2 years now. And before that full rollout is when we were really sitting down and trying to find creative ways. So that's the reason why we did our own thing on the outside, because we were discussing these before, And now, because we are fully AMI deployed, and our members do have the opportunity to see their usage, real-time data, they can go on their smartphone, their computer, and they can monitor this. And now is really the best time, having fully AMI deployed, to have time of use rates and put that into the members' hands for them to make the choice on whether time of use is good for them or not, time of use isn't good for them, based on how they can shift their load. But AMI was one of the largest drivers on why we wanted to start going down this road sooner than later.
So the proposed time of use options that are in PC 44 are not ones that Chop Tank finds to be supportive or useful for their members?
I cannot speak on those rates. I have not dug deep into those rates to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Herman.
Ms. Troutman, with respect to the GT and PT schedules that are filed, does the cooperative have a response to the staff's recommendation? Are you willing to accept that? Where do you stand with respect to the staff's recommendation on those two rate schedules?
We have no issues with staff's recommendations. I just want it to be clear that the analysis that staff is requesting to be completed is on the supply side and not the distribution side. And the marketing materials, we certainly would provide staff and OPC with the marketing materials 30 days in advance. I will say that once they're provided to staff, they're complete. So it's just an FYI at that point.
Okay. Is that of concern to the staff?
I think we would want to be able to comment on it, but I mean, if we go to PC 44, similar situation there, we're commenting on the information on the marketing material being put forward by the utilities. I'm not sure how much effort how much control we have over that after they've given it to us. I think we can make recommendations back. I'm not sure how that's incorporated in the final marketing though. So
right.
I would ask that we have the ability to make comments back and that would be considered.
Well, and these are recommendations with respect to marketing materials for under your proposal for commercial customers, not
right, in
for
which case
residential
we have
customers.
less of a concern. That's more, especially if residential customers get brought in.
Right. Okay. Ms. Troutman, there's been some concern expressed here about the size of the customer charge for the residential schedules in particular. Is there any appetite on behalf of the cooperative to potentially go back and discuss with the staff and the People's Council potentially a compromise on this position?
Several months ago, a few months ago after this filing, I don't remember the exact date, Chop Tank did go back to staff and OPC and said that we would consider reducing the consumer charge to $25, but nothing less.
Mm-hmm.
Staff didn't believe that we could accept that because it's still well above what the commission has approved, / we don't think that we could agree to a rate different from the distribution rates. That's not really a time of use proposal without the commission weighing in on it.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I'm just curious, did the cooperative have any contact or discussions with either People's Council or Staff Council prior to making the filing in June?
Well, the time of use discussion actually began at our pre-filing meeting to our rate case, which was back in 2017. That was a discussion there. After that, I'm not sure of how much discussion was really had with OPC and staff between that meeting and this filing.
Okay. I've quickly found that these discussions prior to a utility filing with representative parties, including our staff and People's Council, usually yields more benefits when it comes to this stage before us. I have no additional questions. Any further from the commissioners? No. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the commission reject the tariff revisions filed for rate schedules RT, RT2, and CT, accept the proposed rate schedules GT and PT with the modifications identified by staff in its comments dated November 21st, 2018. Direct Chop Tank to file clean copies of the revised tariff pages for rate schedules GT and PT with an effective date of January 1st, 2019. Direct Chop Tank to update the GT and PT rate schedules of its SOS tariffs within 1 year of November 28th, 2018, or justify to the Commission that such updates are not necessary. Direct Chop Tank to share all marketing material with with Commission staff and Office of People's Counsel 30 days prior to distribution of the material to customers. And finally, direct Chop Tank to file with the Commission an evaluation after 2 years of the time of use rates being implemented to determine if there is cost shifting and if there are actual system savings being realized.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, next item on the agenda, item number 11 is Columbia Gas of Maryland filed revised tariff pages in compliance with Commission Order number 88923.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. Peter Wilson on behalf of staff. Columbia Gas has filed revised tariff pages to comply with the proposed order issued following its recent rate case. That was case number 9480, as well as Commission Order 88923 of last week affirming that proposed order. Staff has reviewed the company's proposed tariff revisions and determined that they comport with the Commission's orders and Maryland law. Accordingly, staff recommends that the Commission accept the revised tariffs for filing with an effective date of November 26, 2018.
Thank you. Good morning. Would you like to make an appearance?
Theodore Gallagher on behalf of Columbia Gas.
Mr. Gallagher.
I have no comments.
Nothing
If
to
you have
add.
questions, I'll
Thank you.
try and see what I can do about answering them.
Thank you. Any other party or People's Counsel? Not in this matter. Commissioners, any questions? No. Is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I move that we accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of November 26, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved. Thank you.
Next item, Sandpiper Energy, Inc. filed revised tariff pages incorporating the annual adjustments to its delivery service rates.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Kenneth Alpert on behalf of staff. This item addresses the filing by Sandpiper of its annual adjustment to its rates for the delivery of gas and propane to customers. Sandpiper is in the process of converting its customers from propane service to gas service. Under a settlement approved by the Commission in 2016, Sandpiper agreed to file reduced rates on an annual basis that will reduce their base revenue by a total of $830,000, roughly 10%, over a 6-year period, which is in connection with the conversion of customers to the use of gas. The rate reductions are tied to the forecasted number of the customer conversions over that 6-year period. So far, they've converted roughly 6,000 customers. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the tariff sheets for filing.
Thank you, Mr. Albert. 6,000 customers down. How many to go? Do we know? Mr. Quinn.
Good afternoon. Brian Quinn on behalf of Sandpiper. Yes, Mr. Chairman, we've actually converted 7,100 customers, and there's 3,500 customers left, so 67%.
Okay, 2/3 of the way.
Yep.
So
We're done with Berlin. We're up to 70th Street in Ocean City, and most of Ocean Pines is converted, and still working on that. West Ocean City is done. So far, so good.
very good to hear.
Yes, sir.
Other commissioner questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of December 1st, 2018.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, next item also a filing from Sandpiper Energy, Inc. It's also revised tariff pages the company proposes to incorporate its revenue reconciliation within its annual system improvement rate.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. This is a tariff filing by Sandpiper Energy Incorporated implementing its revised system improvement rate, or SIR. The filing proposes to increase the current SIR from 28.1 cents per 100 cubic feet of natural gas to 40.3 cents per 100 cubic feet of natural gas, and from 67.4 cents per 100 cubic feet of propane to 96.6 cents per 100 cubic feet of propane. For customers within the corporate limits of the town of Ocean City, the filing proposes to increase the SERF from the current 30.3 cents per 100 cubic feet of natural gas to 47.7 cents per 100 cubic feet of natural gas, and from the current 72.6 cents per 100 cubic feet of propane to $1.11.45 per 100 cubic feet of propane. The SER methodology was approved by the Commission in 2013 through its approval of a settlement in case number 9303. The SER is a volumetric charge per 100 cubic feet and applies to the residential and commercial sales service rate schedules for the purpose of recovering the cost of bare steel replacement and the cost of distribution system conversion and customer conversions from propane to natural gas. It must be calculated to the nearest tenth of a cent per 100 cubic feet. The company is required to file the annual SER revision with the Commission on an annual basis at least 30 days prior to the December 1st effective date. Staff has reviewed this year's SER calculations and is satisfied they are correct. Staff therefore recommends that the Commission accept the revised tariff pages for filing to be effective for the 12-month billing period of December 1st, 2018 through November 30th, 2019.
Thank you. Do commissioners have any questions?
Quick question for someone from Sandpiper.
Lucky day.
Just
kidding.
This will be easier, maybe, if you know.
Yes.
Do you know if Sandpiper has any what would be considered low-pressure distribution systems?
I can get you the answer.
I'd be interested in knowing that.
Low pressure distribution.
Low pressure. They operate basically at utilization pressures. They're distributed at utilization pressures. So
I'll get you that answer.
Common vernacular in the industry is a low pressure system.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move the Commission accept the tariff revisions for filing to be effective for the 12-month billing period of December 1st, 2018 through November 30th, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion is approved.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Next item, item 14, is the Bank of Delmarva filed a request for a waiver of section XVIIC of Delmarva Power and Light Company's tariff in Comar 208503.
Michael Dean, again on behalf of staff. Item 14 is a filing by the Bank of Delmarva requesting an extension for the date upon which Delmarva Power and Light may draw upon a letter of credit issued for the installation of an underground distribution system for the Sassafras Meadows subdivision through the waiver of a regulation. Under Comar 20.85.03.01, service connections to homes are to be made underground, and 20.85.03.07 allows an underground distribution system for a planned subdivision to be installed, provided a deposit is provided by the developer for the estimated cost, which is then returned on a proportional basis as newly constructed homes are interconnected. After 10 years, the electric company is allowed to retain any remaining portion of the unused deposit. 20.95.03.10 allows the Commission to waive or modify the regulation in unusual circumstances if their application would be impractical or unjust to a party or discriminatory if the request is made prior to commencing construction. The Delmarva tariff allows a, quote, reasonable financial guarantee, unquote, for the deposit. In 2008, subdivision developer Thomas A. Rorick Incorporated provided a letter of credit issued by the Bank of Delmarva as a financial guarantee for the installation by Delmarva Power of an underground distribution system at the Sassafras Meadows subdivision, and the system was installed and energized on December 10, 2008. Another bank entered a judgment against the developer which led to 4 years of legal proceedings before the Bank of Delmarva was able to take control of the Sassafras Meadows development, which was then sold to a new developer, Insight Homes. This year, Delmarva Power informed the Bank of Delmarva that it intended to draw upon its letter of credit when the 10-year period had expired. Through the completion of some houses, the collectible amount under the letter of credit has been reduced to $106,844. The bank then filed a complaint with the Office of External Relations seeking an extension of the date for the letter of credit, but the Office of External Relations closed the matter after it determined that it lacked the authority to grant an extension of the deadline. The bank then filed a request with the Commission for a 2-year extension of the 10-year deadline under Comar 20.85.03.10a, which allows the Commission to waive or adjust the undergrounding requirement if their application would be unjust to any party. Staff notes that the request for such a waiver or modification must be made prior to the construction of the underground system. The bank, in a September 28, 2018 filing, noted the failure to construct and connect the homes was due to the Great Recession, that Insight Homes is now constructing homes in Sassafras Meadows, and that an extension of the maturity date of the letter of credit by 10 months to June 2, 2019 would balance the equities of all parties. Staff, which is bound to follow the statutes, regulations, and Commission precedent in its recommendations and its comments, recommends that the Commission deny the request. Since staff filed its revised comments, the Bank of Delmarva filed a letter providing additional arguments supporting its request on November 20, 2018, mail log number 222972, and Delmarva Power has filed letters requesting denial of the bank's request on November 5, 2018, mail log number 222771, and on November 26, 2018, mail log number 223012.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Counsel for the bank.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Todd Chasen on behalf of the bank this morning. Let me take a step backwards and sort of explain the situation a little bit, because this was a new one by me, and I think it's one that doesn't come before the Commission all that frequently. When a new development is being planned, the electricity needs to be run in for that development, but of course, that line is not immediately used. The houses need to ultimately be built, and as those houses are built and connected, then that line becomes used and useful for the utility. But someone has to actually build the line and pay for it, and that in this instance is Delmarva Power and Light. In order to cover those costs and to make sure that Delmarva is not left holding the bag, a letter of credit is issued by the developer, the initial developer, in order to cover that cost should the development fail, should it take a lot longer to come online. But as those houses are added on, as they're connected in, that letter of credit is reduced proportionally, in this case by a little over $2,500. So the initial letter of credit, you'll see, it was about $121,000. As staff represented, as of about June, it was reduced down to $106,000 because houses had come online, and in fact, they've been actively constructing houses since then, and we believe that the amount of the letter of credit, should it be collected today, is all the way down to about $48,000. So what we're talking about here is the regulatory limit that says that the time for that letter of credit to be outstanding, we need to pick a time, and that time under the regulation is 10 years in the usual circumstance. The first issue before you is whether or not you even have authority, and both the staff and the DPL have argued you don't even have authority to consider our request. They're saying that the threshold is not met. The staff has argued that this has to be made pre-construction. That was the subject of our letter that we filed last Tuesday, is to explain to the Commission that as a matter of simple statutory construction, that's not the case. There are two instances, there are 2 points in time where you can come for this waiver. One is indeed pre-construction if you foresee circumstances knowing that that 10 years isn't going to work. But there's also a retroactive, and that's the instance that we're here today. I'm not going to spend a lot more time on that because I do think it's that clear, but later on I'll be happy to answer questions about it. The second challenge to your ability to even hear this is by DPL saying that, in fact, you need to have a rulemaking on this. This, too, doesn't make any sense. In fact, the Commission, as it's seen this morning, looks at waiver requests all the time. I've been before you, unfortunately, on waiver requests that did not require a rulemaking, but that we need to look at on a case-by-case basis. The very point of the language in the regulation is to make sure that the Commission has flexibility. And then we look at what the waiver condition is, right? The rule says that in unusual circumstances, you can look at whether or not that 10-year period is in fact not appropriate. So in the usual circumstance, you shouldn't grant the waiver. We've got at least 3 different reasons why we come before you on an unusual basis.
Mr. Chasen.
Sure.
Let me interrupt you for a second because I have a preliminary question.
While you're asking, if you don't mind.
Please go right ahead. I'm concerned about the standing of the bank to even ask for this. In the regulation, it says that the utility or applicant may refer the matter to the Commission for modification of the regulations, or before we even get to what all that means. Clearly, the bank is not a utility, and the applicant is specifically defined as developer, builder, property owner, or other person, partnership, association, corporation, or governmental agency applying for permanent electric service to new residential buildings. The bank is not either of those, and I think that potentially this was done because what you have here is a contractual matter. You have a contract with Delmarva Power to provide a letter of credit, and this commission is just simply that the letter of credit exists. So explain to me why you have standing to even ask for this waiver.
I think as the issuer of the letter of credit, of course, as we're going to get to, we now don't have a relationship with the developer or the builders here, but I interpret the applicant as being the one requesting the waiver.
Well, how do you interpret it that way when it's specifically defined as the developer or the entity that's applying for permanent electric service, and you're not either?
I think you have a fair point, Your Honor.
So, I think that's a preliminary problem I can't get past, and I think it potentially makes sense because the letter of credit is not something the commission just requires a letter of credit exists. We don't have jurisdiction over the exercise of that letter of credit. Explain to me how we have jurisdiction over an exercise of a letter of credit.
But the subject matter of the regulation is the letter of credit, right? The whole point of this regulation is the letter of credit, giving it only to the applicant in the sense that it's being defined there, unduly limits and prevents the bank, who's in the position of now being on the hook for this, from making the argument. I think that's the best explanation that I can give you.
Well,
Okay,
Commissioner Herman raises a good point, sir, a procedural point. If the bank doesn't have standing, I don't know if we explore further. But I'm sorry, Commissioner Herman, did I interrupt?
No, I didn't know how to proceed, but I think there is a real standing issue here, and potentially, I don't know, maybe staff wants to comment on the standing issue. Do you have a comment, Mr. Dean, or a position on that?
Well, staff, the regulation text is as it is. The commission hasn't provided any gloss over this in any previous ruling that I'm aware of.
Do you have a? Do you believe that they have standing?
Well, the applicant was the original developer. The developer went bankrupt, and the bank, at 4 years after the bankruptcy, as I understand it, took control of the property, so it would be standing instead of the applicant at that time, although the rights to construct the houses was later sold to Insight Homes, as I understand from the filings. In that case, it may be that the bank could be standing in place of the applicant to some degree.
Great. Well, I'll let you, why don't you
That would
proceed?
be my best argument.
Okay. Why don't you proceed, Mr. Chason, and I'll,
Did you have more to say, Mr. Chason?
That's a fair question. Commissioner Herman has raised a very valid point that had not been raised among the parties ahead of time. What I'd request is the opportunity to stand down without prejudice and file a supplement, either that we have an answer to that question, that in fact we have standing, or in fact withdrawing our request. I would like the opportunity to give this a little bit of thought, and I don't want to spend more of the commission's time, as this morning already has been rather long, on points if in fact you're correct that the threshold issue has not been met.
Well, yes, but at the same time, I'd rather, you should have an opportunity to make that point and do that research, but I think we have enough to go on here to work under the assumption, for the purpose of this conversation, to assume that you do have standing. I'd like to get a little more facts, because it sounds like we have some facts in conflict. The $106,000, is it currently still retained by the bank, or has it been returned to Delmarva?
It is currently retained by the bank. The letter of credit is still outstanding. It was set to expire in early October, and at the agreement of the parties, it's actually been extended until June of next year to make sure that the Delmarva is protected regardless of what happens going forward.
Okay, so Delmarva agreed to extend the letter of credit to June of 2019. How many homes have been built? Staff said 6. I saw something from a bank representative saying 10.
It's a moving target. The issue that we're sort of picking a point in time, but as I understand it, as of my discussion this morning, there are about 19 lots that are left, and they've been building at a rate of about 3 lots a month.
All right, and it was 40-something homes?
48 originally.
48, okay. The letter of credit should have been reduced pursuant to the number of homes built by the time it expired back in October. I don't see any adjustment to that. It seems like we've been using the $106,000 number for some period of time. I think you did a nice job in responding to the waiver request. I still am concerned that the commission does lack the authority to move on the request, but even putting that aside, this appears to be just a contract case, right? Looking at the four corners of the terms of the letter of credit, you cite unusual circumstances, but a downturn in the economy, is that what you're arguing is the unusual circumstance?
That was the point at which Commissioner Herman asked the question. What I was beginning to get into was, in fact, the unusual circumstances. I think that the magnitude of the downturn is a piece of it. The fact that the initial developer lost its interest, and I want to make a correction here because staff, I think, misunderstood the earlier filing. It was not this bank that took back the development and then sold it to Insight. It's a separate bank. Our only interest in this project was the issuance of the letter of credit.
Who was that, PNC?
The PNC, correct. Mr. Rourke was the original letter of credit holder. PNC recaptured the project, sold it to Insight, which is the current developer and who is currently selling off the lots and working with builders to redevelop it. So that was not, we did not capture anything, we did not resell the project, we didn't do any of that as a result of it, which I think is a material point. I think it looks a little different if it looks like we recaptured something as a result of that, but clearly that's not the case. It's that mismatch between the issuance of the original letter of credit and the current interest holders in the project that I think makes this so unusual. The other piece to all of this, of course, is that we're not asking for an extended period of time. We're asking for a few more months. As we can see, this issue is resolving itself as it goes along. Every time a new lot comes on, about $2,500 comes off of this. We've reduced, just within the last few months, the amount by more than half. We would expect that at the rate of 3 houses a month, we were going to continue to reduce that at a pretty good pace over the next few months.
No, I recognize that and somewhat sympathetic, but the terms of the contract were 10 years. Interested to see if counsel for the utility has anything more to add.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You had a question for Jason?
Okay, yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Matt Seegers appearing for Delmarva Power. You have our comments. Just to briefly summarize, as we've explained in our comments, under the plain language of COMAR Section 20.85.03.10a, the Commission would appear to lack the requisite authority to grant the bank's waiver request. Specifically, the Commission has only provided for two narrow forms of relief, neither of which are applicable to the circumstances of the bank's waiver request. In addition, Commissioner Herman has raised a very excellent point. So even before we get to the language of the specific waiver provision, a determination must be made as whether or not the bank even qualifies for it as an applicant. And as a practical matter, Your Honors, as we further explained in our comments filed on November 26th, our customers would unjustly be required to continue to pay for the entire service extension distribution rates if the bank's waiver request is granted. And just to make clear, when a service extension like this is built, and once it's energized, it is placed into our it is placed into our rate base, and then that subsequently is placed into our customers' distribution rates. For that period of 10 years, as Mr. Chasen described, the development is given credit against the letter of credit for the number of homes that are added. But after 10 years, both COMAR and our tariff require us to draw on whatever's left on that letter of credit. And when that happens, the unsubscribed portion of that service extension, the portion that is paid for by that letter of credit, that reduces our rate base, and therefore that is subsequently passed on to our customers in their distribution rates. So if you extend this, then that means that our customers are going to be continuing to pay.
Mr. Seegers, Mr. Chasen just mentioned that the company, Delmarva, agreed to extend this until June 2019. What is that about?
I unfortunately don't know, Your Honor. We have not. We've agreed to hold off on drawing on the letter of credit until the Commission rules on this matter, but we have not agreed to extend this until June 2019.
Maybe Mr. Chasen could clarify what that, because I'm confused about this.
Because I do think maybe you misunderstood me. Yeah. Back in October, the letter of credit was set to expire. We had filed our request with the Commission, but it had not yet been heard.
Right.
Bank of Delmarva quite correctly said, if you guys don't extend this, we're going to have to call it now and not allow you to wait. If you, and the Commission staff was also involved in that discussion, if you extend it, then we won't call it at this point. We'll wait for the Commission to rule on this. The June date was picked by the bank as just being a safe time that was far enough out that would cover at least a portion, if not all, of any extension that was given. The June 2019 date was not one that was an agreed upon date. I didn't mean to suggest that Delmarva had consented to that period. Is that helpful?
Sorry, it was or was not an agreed upon date?
That was not an agreed upon date. That was what was agreed upon was that the October extension would occur. The June 2019 date was one that was selected by the bank unilaterally.
Understood.
Is that helpful?
Okay, yeah, that clarifies.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Seegers, assume the letter of credit is called upon, you receive the $106,000+ if that's the right amount. I'm still fuzzy on whether or not 10 homes or 6 have been completed by the expiration. Would Delmarva then receive reconnection fees when these additional homes come online, thereby providing double enrichment to the utility?
No, Your Honor. And actually, I could bring up our subject matter expert to talk about the difference in terms of the facilities that are covered by the letter of credit, the service extension facilities, and the facilities that would be connected or that would be covered by a service connection fee.
Okay, but maybe I don't need that level of detail, but sure. There would be no double recovery if you receive
none, Your Honor.
The bank and you receive additional connection fees. Okay. Let me allow the other commissioners to ask some questions. Commissioner Herman.
Just on that, I'm sorry to interrupt. Is normally, I believe it's Insight Homes is the builder. Insight is sort of paying Delmarva, and that's paying down the letter of credit. Is that what's happening, or is that not what's happening?
I'm going to have to bring up my subject
fine.
matter expert.
I'm just trying to,
who's paying.
because I'm trying to, like while we don't want Delmarva to recover more, or if Delmarva did recover more, then it would go to the benefit of ratepayers. But we also don't want to unjustly enrich the builder who ends up in the situation where they're not paying for something they would have been paying for. So that's where I'm confused.
Sure. I can bring up my subject matter expert in terms of like who is actually paying the service extension fees to Delmarva.
If I could mention the way the letter of credit works, Delmarva Power holds the letter of credit. It didn't receive the funds of the letter of credit. It just tells the maximum amount that Delmarva could recover. And as homes are constructed, the amount of money that it could recover under the letter of credit is reduced.
Okay, so there's no unjust enrichment on behalf of the builder.
No.
Okay, all right, that's what I was trying to get to. Thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chasen, could I ask you to come back up? I wanted to ask you to further clarify what the impact on the bank would be should we accept staff's recommendation to deny the waiver. Tell me what impact that will have.
The bank would have to, DPL would call the letter of credit, whatever the remaining balance is, and Delmarva, the Bank of Delmarva would pay that amount, whatever the reduced amount is, to the utility, and would effectively have no means of recovering.
But that was the original contract that you made with Delmarva.
Our contract is not with.
It was with the developer. Excuse me.
The letter of credit was issued with the utility as the beneficiary on behalf of our customer, Mr. Rourke.
But that was an acceptable risk when that was entered into.
That was the deal that was made at the time, correct.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I saw the letter of credit working the way it was originally intended to. It was designed to protect the utility in the event of a situation just like what happened. And so I guess the only question that I had regarding the impact now is, for the bank is just a follow-up on the answer that Mr. Chasen just provided. You said that the bank would have no recourse if the letter of credit was called by the utility company. Is the bank involved in some way with the builder still? I mean, is it that you are providing financing, or is the bank actually the builder? Or?
No, we have no connection whatsoever to the project.
Okay, so you couldn't pursue the project owner?
The only person who theoretically we could pursue is Mr. Rourke, the original requester of the letter of credit. But folks who lose their developments and everything else usually are not good for the money.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Noting that we have a possible real issue regarding standing of the bank in this case, for the purposes of reaching a determination in this item, Commission will assume that Bank of Delmarva does have standing for purposes of rendering this decision only. So I would ask if there is a motion.
Well, I would make a motion, Mr. Chairman, to deny the waiver request.
Thank you. Commissioner Herman?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The motion is approved. The Commission denies the bank's waiver request.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. We'll take the last item. Finish up.
Mr. Chairman, last item on the agenda, item 15, is Chester Woods Point Solar LLC filed a request for regulatory relief from the Community Solar Pilot Program operational deadlines for a project in Queen Anne's County, Maryland.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Annette Garofalo on behalf of Commission staff. Chester Woods Point Solar LLC is seeking a waiver of the operation deadline established under COMAR 2062-0304C in order to extend that deadline for 6 months after the 18-month operation deadline for completing a community solar energy generation system. This would result in a 24-month period in which to bring this project into full operation. It is applicant's position that new county legislation applicable to its facility constitutes a pending legal challenge. Additionally, as good cause, which is required under Comar 20-620104 for the granting of a waiver, applicant cites the unavailability of a contract disclosure form until April 2018. Chester Woods was accepted into the pilot in August 2017, making its 18-month deadline under Comar February 2019. Although Queen Anne's County, in which Chester Woods will be located, did cause some delay to applicant when the county took time to debate and pass a new ordinance that was applicable to community solar. The ordinance has passed, and Chester Woods is now in full compliance with all requirements under the new ordinance. Also, Chester Woods has received all county permits that are required for its building. Thus, there's no pending challenge. I would just note, as we noted in our comments, that we're not certain this would apply in any case, that this would represent a pending legal challenge, even if it were pending, but it's not pending. Chester Woods, in the alternative, asked for a waiver because the contract disclosure form required under Comar 20-6205 was not made available until April 2018. This was the same month applicant's revised site plan was submitted to the county, and an earlier issue date would not have affected Chester Woods' progress. In addition, staff does not believe the issuance of this form 9 months ago constitutes good cause upon which a waiver should be based today, and asks the Commission not base any waiver on the issuance of date of this form. The company did not mention the winter construction weather, but staff recommends that the Commission, consistent with its previous rulings, extend applicant's operation deadline to June 1, 2019 due to winter construction issues, thereby granting Chester Woods a time-limited waiver of Comar's operation deadline of approximately 120 days.
Thank you, Ms. Garofalo. Is the company Chester Woods present? They are not. Do commissioners have questions? Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we grant the company a time-limited waiver of Comar 20-620304C2, extending the applicant's operation deadline to June 1st, 2019.
Is there a second?
Begrudgingly second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion is approved. Seeing no additional business before the commission today, this meeting is adjourned.